Thank you very much. In this program, we are going to talk about communication. And I want to tell you a story about in New York City, you can sit opposite someone you didn't know before. And Mr. Goldberg, who was Jewish, sat opposite Mr. Chin, who was Chinese. And they introduced themselves. And in the middle of the meal, Mr. Goldberg threw a matzo ball in Mr. Chin's face. And he said, begging your pardon, what was that for? He said, that was for bombing Pearl Harbor. He said, he said, excuse me, I forgive you and my ancestors forgive you, but I am not Japanese, I am Chinese. He says, Chinese, Japanese, they all the same. So a little later, Mr. Chin took a spoonful of rice and popped it right in Mr. Goldberg's face. He said, what was that for? He said, that was for sinking the Titanic. He said, I didn't sink no Titanic, it was an iceberg. He said, iceberg, Goldberg, they all the same. I have to tell you this, that I believe that very few people know how to communicate and practice communication. We practice manipulation, the games people play, but we don't practice real communication. I don't think we do, to a great extent. There are some people that do, but they're very rare. Now, what is communication? What does it mean to communicate? I suppose the nearest synonym would be to share, sharing. What do you share when you communicate? Well, you share yourself. If I communicate a recipe to you, it means we have something in common now. You and I have the same recipe or a recommendation. But in human communication, what I share is me. I tell you who I am, and you tell me who you are, and I love you, and you love me, and that's real communication. When we really share who we really are, that's communication. Now, I must admit that I know very few people who know how to communicate, but I think that it's very important to learn how to communicate, because I think that if we don't communicate, we're aliens. We pass like ships in the night of one another. And I think that this is difficult. Communication is primarily of feelings. When you communicate yourself, you communicate mostly in terms of feelings. When I say, I'd like to share some ideas with you on this or that subject, you can hear the can opener, can't you? You say, he's read another book. He's going to share the ideas in that book. You don't know the original, but when I tell you how I feel very lonely today, I feel very sad, I feel very upbeat today, I feel very vivacious today, then you know it's me, because my feelings are me. My feelings are like my fingerprints. They're unique, but not my ideas. I don't know if I've ever had an original idea in my life. I've written a number of books, but I don't think any of the ideas are mine. I think I've stolen them from someone else or got the idea from someone else. But my feelings are me, and they're unique. And so when I communicate myself to you, what I really communicate is my feelings. I tell you how I feel. But it's very important, extremely important, to own your own feelings. To know that no one else can cause your feelings. You don't say, you made me feel this way. You made me feel inferior, and so on. I can't make you feel any particular way. So you don't say you statements in good communication. You say, make I statements. I feel very angry. And I really don't know why I do. Maybe what I saw was that you started to yawn. And I felt you were bored with me. And so you see, I felt bad about that. I felt bad that you were bored. And you say, oh, no, I have narcolepsy. I always fall asleep, at the drop of a hat, And then we can talk. We're communicating now. But what I communicate to you is I felt sad. I don't know why I did. I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying you made me feel sad, but I felt sad. Because you can't produce a feeling in me. You can only stimulate a feeling, and then something in me decides what feeling I have in response. Right. So when we communicate, what we communicate is mostly feelings, and we communicate through I statements. We have to own the feelings. And I think something else that is, it's just death to good communication is judgments. I could see right through you. I have x-ray eyes, you know. I know, you're not fooling me. You know, this sort of thing is deadly, is lethal to good communication. I can't judge you. And you know, I want to tell you this is true, that every time I have ever judged anyone, I've always been wrong. Sometimes only a little wrong, but sometimes I was miles wrong. But I'm always wrong. There's always some additional thing that I never thought of. So I can't judge you. And judgments are death to communication. I remember one time a couple, the man had a fetish. He was sexually aroused by a thing, and he used to steal this object. And his wife didn't know about it, but he had it since he was an adolescent. And one night the police came to the front door and said, we want your husband. And she said, for what? He's a thief. Oh, she said, not my husband. He's no thief. My goodness, if he finds a nickel, he goes looking for the owner. And she said, you don't know, the police said, you don't know your husband, madam. So he came to the door and he said, no, they're right, honey. I'll explain this to you later. And he did. And she thought about it for a little while. And then she said, I want a divorce. I never knew you. And she came to me and I said, you know, he's sick. I think you took him in sickness and in health, didn't you? Wasn't that what you said? Well, he's sick. But I have good news for you. A fetish is a curable psychological problem. And so she went home, and they made a deal. I didn't know about this, that if it ever happened again, he would tell her. And he told her again. It happened 2 or 3 times during the next month. And she said, when is this going to stop? And he said, I have no idea. And she's, now I need a divorce. Well, they came to my office. This is a true story. I wish I had a video to show you. They came to my office. They weren't even talking to each other. And she said, and this time I want a divorce, and you're not going to talk me out of it. No one's going to talk me out of it. And he said, if she wants a divorce, she can have it. He said, I'm fed up with this talk of divorce. And so I knew I needed shock therapy. So a little sweet little priest like me, I said, shut up and sit down. Well, they didn't know where that came from. So they immediately sat down, and I said, now, I just want your feelings about this whole matter. Now, please don't make judgments. And please don't resurrect past history. Tell me how many times this has happened. This man's sick, this woman's sick, you know. Just your feelings, and don't blame them on the other person, all right? And so I turned to the wife, who seemed to be more capable and intelligent than he was, and I said, what is your main feeling? And she said, insecurity. And she told me about how she felt insecure. She said, I'm used to competing with other women. I know how to compete with other women, but I don't know how to compete with a fetish. And so I think of running away from the problem. And the running away from the problem is leaving him, is divorcing him. And then I was raised to think that divorce was wrong. So I feel guilty. Oh, God, I feel so guilty about this whole thing. And I said, yes, I understand. And then she went through all of her feelings. At the end, she said, I think that's my last feeling. About 10 of them she went through, though, layers and layers of feelings. And it really was really good. At the end, I said, there's one feeling that I thought I saw on your face when you came into my office that you did not mention. And that's anger. Are you angry at him? Would you like to hurt him because he has hurt you? And she started to cry, and she said, no, the poor man, he has been hurt enough. And she said that with great sympathy in her voice, and his eyes were popping. They were like saucers. She really thinks that. She's not mad at me. And he was very surprised to hear what her real feelings were. And then I turned to him and I said, what's your main feeling? He said, I thought you were going to ask that. I had already. Shame. Without any doubt, my main feeling is shame. He said, I think I ought to have a sign on myself that says I might be contagious. And he said, oh, it's terrible. And he said a number of things that were very impressive. He said, sometimes my little boys are playing in my lap and I kick them out. Go play somewhere else. And they say, why, Daddy? Don't ask me why. Just go play somewhere else. He said, because it comes over me like a chill that maybe I will program them to go through the same kind of hell that I've been through. Oh, and I don't want that. So I kicked them out of my lap. And he said, sometimes I feel like the whole world is having a picnic out there and I didn't get invited. And I'm looking through the fence at all these people that are laughing and singing and dancing out there at the picnic. And then he's a big fellow, physically a big man, and he said, this last emotion is going to be very hard to tell you. And I said, stretch, man, you can do it. And he said, oh. He said, I want to cry. I want to cry about this whole thing. But he said, I just can't cry. I guess I need someone to give me permission to cry. And she jumped up from her chair and she took his head in her arms. She cradled his head and said, oh, honey, you can cry. It's all right. And he did. He cried. And pretty soon he's standing up and they're kissing each other and holding each other, you know. And I thought, oh, my goodness. And honest to goodness, this is true, that they walked out arm in arm. They've lived happily ever after, as far as I know. They're still together. They're still, I think, at peace. Because what they learned, and what I learned, was the necessity of expressing your feelings to the other person. So they did express their feelings to each other. They were very surprised by their feelings. But when they got them across, it was magic. It solved all their problems. All that anger was a cover-up, racket emotion, was a cover-up hiding something else that they didn't want to just say. But when I asked them what their feelings were, don't make any judgments, please don't make any judgments, please don't resurrect that past history, they came together. They really understood each other. So this is very important, I think, to good communication. And I think I feel very strongly about this because I don't think my mother and father ever really communicated. I think that they played games, and the emotional divorce, they never really divorced. They'd always lived together. But the emotional divorce took place when I was 13 years old, and my mother came home and she said she had a teaching job. And she said they're going to start me out at, and she quoted a salary that was more than my father made as a shoe salesman. And his brother was a famous lawyer, and his sister taught literature at a respected university, and he was a shoe salesman. And so when all the cheering died down, oh, happy days are here again, my father said, please don't take that job. Don't take that job. And she said, oh, just why not? On what you're making, we can't support this family. Have you noticed the roof is leaking? We can't afford to have it repaired. And she just said, well, I don't know why I shouldn't. And he is saying, don't take that job. All night long, they said that to each other. Now, what I think is, and it has to be a post-mortem psychoanalysis, is that he had a massive inferiority complex. Because his brother was a famous lawyer and his sister, but he thought he could make it as the prodigal son by humor, and he found out he couldn't make it. And so he didn't make it. He really didn't. And my mother went to work, and that was the last nail in the coffin of his ego. And from that point on, I don't think they communicated. And I don't think he communicated with anybody. He just went kind of into a shell of himself. And you never knew who he was. And when he was dying, this was interesting. I was just ordained a priest. And I went to the hospital room, and I said, Dad, they're having a vacation. I was studying in Rome. They're having a vacation. I come home to see you. I heard you were sick. And he said, am I dying? And he was dying. The doctor told us he would die in about 20 days. And I didn't know that you're supposed to tell dying people, yes, that's what the doctor says. And then you can talk about it. And I lied and said, no, you'll be well, Dad. You'll be up and on your feet in a couple of weeks. You wait and see. He said, oh. And I could see him then repressing, even had to lie to the very end of his life. But you know what I was hoping? I was hoping I would get to know my father in the last 20 days of his life. I was hoping that we could say something that would unlock all those years of mystery, but we didn't. And when he did die, he was lying in a reclining position. He sat up, and he was looking over my right shoulder. I was there every morning at 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock in the morning, didn't leave till 9 o'clock at night. And he looked over my right shoulder at the door of the room, and I swear that he saw something. Now, it could be that someone else would say, well, it was the veins collapsing, it was the brain cells dying or something. But he's going, oh. in utter awe. And I knew he was dying because my father never showed feelings like that unless he was dying. He wouldn't have showed feelings like that in life. So I put my hand behind his head and put it down on the bed, the pillow, and closed his eyes. And I said to my mother, who was sitting saying her prayers on the other side of the bed, I think Dad is dead now, Mother. And she leaned across the bed and said, he loved you very much, you know. He was very proud of you. And I didn't know why she said that. It sort of hit and fell down. I thought, why don't she try out one of the bromides that people use at the moment of death, like, you know, it's God's will, the suffering is over. Why did she say that? And when I was out getting a doctor to verify that my father really had died, it came to me that he never said that. He couldn't say that. He couldn't tell me he loved me. He couldn't tell me he was proud of me. Oh, I got it back via the grapevine. But you say, is it important then that he was able to say it to you? And I say, oh, yes, I think it is. You see, half of what you are as you sit there and half of what I am as I stand here is determined by the memories we carry inside of us. I have no memory of a father saying, I really love you. I'm really proud of you. And so I think for that reason, I feel very strongly about this. You know, my dad sat up in a Hermitage bedroom of our house, and he read Reader's Digest, and he would annotate the articles. And when I was, after he died and was buried, and I was going back, I said, could I take back those Reader's Digest to the seminary with me? And they said, well, they're old copies. You can have them if you want them. And I didn't want them for the articles. I wanted them to know who my father was. And I read all of his annotations to try to find out who he was. Who was that mystery locked inside him? And what I think is that people who are married often do this. They pass like ships in the night. They don't really tell each other who they are. Perhaps it's this massive inferiority complex. Perhaps it's the games people play. We learn to manipulate. As little children, we manipulate. We cry when we can't get another ice cream cone. We don't really want another ice cream cone that badly, but we think we can manipulate people. It's a show of power, manipulation is. And I think, oh, that's really too bad that we can't really communicate. We can't really share who we are. And the last thing I would like to say is that a man once asked me, I've read all your books and there's something I don't understand. I said, what's that? And he said, why should I tell you who I am? I've written a book called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? And I said, let me ask you a question. The Irish, you know, reserve that privilege of answering a question by asking one. When they said to the Irishman, why do you do that? He said, oh, do we now? I said, would you enrich me if you did tell me who you are? And he said, no, I can't imagine I would. And I said, see, that's where we would disagree. I think you would. I think you would take me into schools that I've never attended. You would introduce me to brothers and sisters I've never had, into mountains of exhilaration I've never climbed, into valleys of depression I've never experienced. And I hope that you will tell the people that you love them, and share yourself, unlock the doors and walk out and be who you are. And Loretta and I are now going to entertain you together with an exercise. We're going to role play the blocks of good communication. Loretta?
Communication is a serious topic, but we also are intending to have some fun with this exercise, because all of us have been in situations where we wish the communication had been better. And you know, it's a funny thing. I think we all know how to talk, but we don't always know how to communicate when we have to and really be a good speaker. And the same thing is true. We all know how to hear, but we don't always come through as good listeners, and we wish we could. So we're going to give you a few examples of communication and how not to listen, mainly. I'm going to try and be a wonderful speaker, and John's going to try and be a horrible listener. But what John's going to do is use something we call listening blocks, certain ways that he behaves or interacts that really are blocking his listening. And let me describe what they are first before we do the role play. One is a thing called advising, where when one of us goes to someone with a problem and we want to talk out our problem and our feelings, and what they give us back is a solution, and all we wanted was for them to hear. And instead they advise us. Another listening block is computing, where while we're speaking, the other person, you can almost hear the computer clicking away. They're trying to analyze and figure out who we are. They're not listening. It's like we're a case. They're computing. Another listening block is distracting, where when I'm trying to speak and really share something with you, and and you're like, wait, I've got to watch the game, you know, something else is on here, or someone's talking to me. Totally distracted into another arena rather than listening. Or a block called filtering is sometimes used, where when I speak, I give you my whole story, but you only really want to talk about maybe the nice piece, so you only filter out that piece to talk about. Then there's gunny sacking, a phrase you might be familiar with, and that's when I start to talk about negative emotions, and maybe it becomes too much for my speaker, and they decide, I'll give you negative emotions, and they dump all the negative emotions out of their gunny sack that they've been saving, and they dump right on me. Or ignoring, simply ignoring the person who's speaking. That's certainly a way to block listening. Or name calling, you know, you so-and-so, I'll tell you who you are. Then there's placating. Just whatever you're saying, I want to calm you down and stop the conversation so there's no ruffles and no conflict. Or rehearsing. While you're talking, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say to answer you. You haven't even finished talking and I'm already thinking about what I'm going to say. Or sarcasm, you know, cutting you down. Critical remarks to cut your self-image down. And then there's upstaging. There's the famous, if I got a story for you, well, I've got one even better. That's called upstaging. So see if you can guess among those listening blocks that I've just described here, which one Jen's using whenever I try so hard to be a wonderfully clear communicator. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The funniest thing happened to me the other day. I was driving down the street and I thought I was on my way to work, and suddenly I found myself halfway to the beach. I couldn't believe it.
You think that's funny? You think that's funny? I did the same thing, but I had a even more funny experience.
But see,
I was driving to school, and I discovered that suddenly I was driving somewhere else.
What do you think? Upstaging to the to the nth degree. You know, I really need to talk to somebody today. I'm just feeling so down. I don't know. I just have this saddest feeling, like, you know, I've been working on this project and it just doesn't seem to be worthwhile, and what's the point of it? And I just really feel
well, I don't
low
think
and down.
there is a point for you. I don't think you ever have a point. I don't think you ever see a point. I don't think you ever do anything with a point.
Sarcasm, I guess. You know, if you have a few minutes, I'm needing to do some talking about, well, really what's been going on between us. I have some feelings that are building up, and I think rather than just, you know, walk away and feel bad and so forth, I really like to clear the air with you and talk about some of these feelings. Is that all right? Are you in a good place for that right now?
I think you're a brat. That's what I think. I think you're just a big brat.
Please, quick, stop him. Name calling, definitely. Okay. Well, what I was trying to say is that I just need to clear the air with you. I just feel like if I don't get some of these feelings said, they're just going to build up and cause more trouble, and it's just going to be more difficult.
You know, 6 years ago, you ignored me. And I remember that so clearly. And 5 years ago, you did the same thing. 5 years ago, you didn't give me a Christmas present.
Gunny sacking? Gunny sacking?
Right?
Was that a gunny sack or what? All right. I have a problem going on right now, and I really need to use someone for a sounding board. Would that be okay? It's a problem with someone who I'm working with right now, and we have to work together. We have to get this thing done.
Did you notice that the eagles are building a nest?
Distracting. Distracting, yes, okay. Well, maybe if I put it this way, I mean, today's at work was so difficult. I just had such a terribly hard day. I don't know. You know, I don't know how to get around it, and I got to go tomorrow.
I'll tell you what you should do. No, listen, let me...
Whoa, advising. They saw you coming a mile away. Getting sharp there. Well, there are other things I want to talk to you about. I mean, I got this great idea that I'm really enthused about, and it's just the most exciting thing that's come along in a long time. And I'm just so excited. I want to tell you all about it.
Do you know that studies have shown that when a person thinks, they get a new idea. Now, these studies are computerized. These studies have been...
Computing. I want to talk to a person, not a machine. Well, maybe it's time we talk about planning that trip. You know, we have to go and give a whole series of talks out east, and I think we have to arrange, you know, the program, and we have to get all the plane tickets and so forth arranged, and I think we better sit down and have a little talk about that now. Okay?
I don't want to talk about the whole thing, but what I need to talk about is the program itself. Now, see, I mean, the other stuff is all this garbage as far as I'm concerned, but the program...
Filtering, right. Good. Okay.
Sharp.
Sharp, yes, very sharp. The thing I want to talk to you about now, though, is really, it's really kind of heavy. I lost my job. He ignored me before he knew what the topic was. This is a professional ignorer, maybe.
Thank you very much.
I mean, sometimes when I'm trying to communicate to you, I just really feel criticized, and it's hard for me to get myself out and say what I need to say, because I just feel like...
I feel so sorry. I really do.
Oh,
Oh,
you're
there you
right,
got
you're
it.
right.
There.
Do you notice how placating just shut me down? I mean, I had just gotten started to boil into this topic. Just put like a big blanket over me. It was over. Yeah, put out the fire before it ever got going. Okay. You know, I'm involved in something that I need to, I need to get it straight before I go ahead and do it. I'm just not sure what to do. You see, the project is kind of complicated, but I have to make some decisions by tomorrow, and I was wondering if I could sort it out with you. And
But I don't think you ought to even try to make a decision, because you're going to get a migraine headache. If you try to think for yourself, it'll result in a migraine headache.
Name calling, advising, sarcasm, you name it. He gave us the whole shot. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful speaking with you.
That's great.
In the next segment, you won't see the happiness players again, but we're going to continue the enjoyment, I think, because what we're going to talk about is ways in which we can really learn and use the time we have on this earth to enjoy life in the process. Okay? Thank you very much.